We now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 38. Deputy MacDonald.
€430,000. Taoiseach, that's the outrageous salary you propose to pay to your new housing czar. Nearly €500,000, an astonishing amount of taxpayers' money for the salary of just one person. It's more than the Taoiseach's very generous salary. It's even more than the President of the United States is paid. It's the starting salary of 11 new nurses, or 11 new Gardaí, or 13 new special needs assistants. And what's to be the role of this new highly paid czar? Well, from what we've heard, he will focus on removing roadblocks to housing construction, to getting houses built more quickly, to speeding up housing delivery. In other words, the main responsibilities of the Minister for Housing. A very expensive job share. Clearly, your government have no confidence in Minister James Brown to do his job. €430,000, Taoiseach, is a slap in the face for working people who are hit with rip-off bill after rip-off bill and who struggle to make it to the end of the week. It's a kick in the teeth for those saving every spare cent, desperately trying to put together the deposit for a house. It's a kick in the teeth for every young person who has been forced to leave this country because they cannot afford a home. So how do you justify this extravagant gold-plated salary to those who are forced to fork out €2,000 on rent every month? To families who wait and wait and wait on council waiting lists for a home? How do you justify it to mothers and fathers forced into homelessness, raising their children in hotel rooms or hubs? The appointment of the housing czar changes nothing for them, that's the truth. This new cushy job is part and parcel of the same broken Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael policies that landed us in this mess in the first place. So as house prices, rents, homelessness all continue to rise, and as your government misses its inadequate housing targets year after year, your next move, your next big idea is to appoint another bureaucrat on an eye-watering salary. It truly beggars belief. We've had the most expensive bike shed in the world, the €1 million security hut, the €9 million on phone pouches, so people already know that your government is a serial waster of public money. But I have to say, this one really takes the biscuit. You've actually gone to the trouble of making up a job with a salary of 430 grand simply to give the appearance of government action when you're doing nothing at all except going round and round in circles. It's your clearest admission that this government has no new idea of substance or any real plan to fix housing. So nor atá Fianna Fáil is Fine Gael plays sóra acrú chun job an ara tíochta dhéanamh agus ceracéad €3 million a íoc leis, tá sí a adháil go soléir go bhfuil plán tíochta an rialtas ina phráiseach. You see, you deliberately misled the electorate in November. You deliberately used false housing delivery figures to take the bad look off yourself, and you did that brazenly. And now you're at it again, spinning, bluffing and taking people for fools as you spectacularly fail. You dream up this appointment. Taoiseach, can you confirm that your new housing czar will be paid €430,000? Can you tell us how on earth you stand over this? And can you tell us, explain to us why you're recruiting a job share for your housing minister?
Thank you. Taoiseach.
First of all, I couldn't disagree more with the Deputy in terms of her critique of government housing policy. The bottom line is that if you look over the last 4 years, there's been a very significant step change in the level and scale of housing delivery in this country. And if you take a loan on social housing, close to 48,000 houses plus have been added to the social housing stock. 48,000 plus. Not since the 1970s have we seen that level and scale of social house building and social house provision. Those are the facts. We need to do far more than that, but without question, the figures and the number of social houses built in the last 3 to 4 years is without compare, and you'd have to go back to the 1970s to get similar levels of social house completion. And if you look over the last and the first 3 years of Housing for All, 2022, 2023, 2024, the overall housing targets were exceeded. So it's not as you dismiss it all as all failure and failure. It's not. Those were the targets set by Housing for All, and they were exceeded. Over 130,000 houses constructed. Now we need to do much, much more. The ESRI have said that the need in terms of population growth and so on is around 50,000 per annum. And you have failed in any shape or form to provide any substance underpinning housing policy in respect of how you would achieve that target, never mind the 30,000+ houses that have been achieved on an annual basis over the last 3 years. Your policies were demonstrably anti-first-time buyer, and there's been quite a significant drawdown. Up to 120,000 first-time buyer mortgages have been drawn down over the last number of years. Now, if you had had your way, you would have taken away the supports, such as the Help to Buy scheme, or indeed the Bridge the Gap scheme, from those first-time buyers. And you would have destroyed the momentum that has been built up over the last number of years in respect of first-time buyers. That is the reality in terms of that. You can smile all you like, Deputy Loughlin, but that is the truth. You wanted to get rid of the Help to Buy scheme. You wanted to get rid of the Bridge the Gap scheme. You please explain to first-time buyers how that would have assisted them, because it would not in any shape or form. And we're going to maintain the focus in terms of both social housing, affordable, and in terms of our work with the Land Development Agency. Already this year, an additional 800 million has been allocated on top of the 6 billion, for 50 million for the further 3,000 affordable and social homes, and 325 million in respect of second-hand acquisitions, incorporating the tenant in situ scheme and the provision for that. And since 2023 alone, over 3,300 homes have been acquired through second-hand, as are called, acquisitions by local authorities across the country. And we have published the National Planning Framework since we came back into office, which will facilitate the zoning of a considerable greater degree of land. And I hope you will support that on local authorities across the country and get rid of your serial opposition to social housing that has been demonstrated time and time again.
Please.
And also, in terms of the short-term lets, heads of bill has been brought to Cabinet, has been approved by Cabinet. In terms of the Housing Activation Office, a decision was taken today by Government to establish that office. No decision has been taken in terms of who will head up that office, but to say this much, the person will be seconded from within the public service is an intention, which basically means there will be no additional cost in salary or whatever to housing, or to anybody for that matter, in terms of a secondment within the public service. That's the objective, but no decision has been made. So I'm not confirming, not in a position to confirm anything to you today in that respect.
Deputy MacDonald.
So you built less houses last year than the year before, and the indications are that you will fail to meet targets again this year and build less. Look, the evidence is there for all to see in growing costs, in the levels of homelessness. All of the evidence and data is there, but more importantly, the reality is lived every day, you see, Taoiseach. So you can stand up and you can spoof and you can shout at me and point your finger, but you can't alter the reality of your failure, your abject failure, which astonishingly you're attempting to dress up as success. If that's your idea of success, God help us, should we ever see something that you might deem to be a failure or an underperformance. I asked you 3 questions. I want you to confirm for us this hour will be paid 430,000 euros. I don't care where they're seconded from. Is that the salary envisaged? I want you to explain how you stand over this. But more importantly, why are you double jobbing your Minister for Housing?
Thank you, Deputy.
You have a full Cabinet Minister for Housing.
Thank you, Deputy.
Why is it that you have so little confidence? Perhaps you, in reality, agree with all of us that neither he nor any of you are up to the task.
Just Just to confirm, Deputy, that the Central Statistics Office published on Thursday, and you're good for giving your side of perspective all the time, did indicate that close to 6,000 new homes were completed in Q1 of 2025, which is the second highest Q1 delivery since the data series began in 2011, and a 2% increase on Q1 of 2024. It's a figure that you didn't in any shape or form refer to, not surprisingly, because you didn't in any shape or form want to point to any figures that gave some degree of positive reality, although we acknowledge that we want to build far more and we have far more to build. And I mean, you have a record yourself of opposing well over 1,000 houses in your own constituency. And you put your own constituency needs above and beyond the housing. You did. You objected to well over 1,000 houses in your constituency. And that, in my view, it's a bit rich for you to come in here on a daily basis ranting on about housing when your own record in respect of giving it the ultimate priority that it deserves is fairly poor in terms of your performance.
And we move.
And in terms of the programme for government is clear in its decision. The programme for government ordained that we would set up a housing activation office because we're going to consistently add to the initiatives we've already taken in housing, and we make no apology for doing further in terms of.
Deputy Ivana Bacik of the Labour Party.
Taoiseach, as we know, childhood is short, and children who are being failed by the state today do not have the luxury of time. There are massive negative consequences for any child who receives inappropriate schooling or, worse, no schooling at all. And yet, across the state, we're seeing systemic failures in provision for children with additional needs. And that is why, once again, we in Labour will be using our private members' time tomorrow morning to propose a motion on special education. And that motion has 9 sensible, simple and strategic asks, Taoiseach, to address the ongoing failures of this state to provide school places for children with special or additional educational needs. Taoiseach, we're all aware of this crisis because across the country we have all heard the immense frustration from parents, grandparents, siblings, teachers who are desperately trying to do all they can to ensure the children in their lives are provided with appropriate education. Parents are writing to all of us, to their TDs, they're sleeping out on the streets in protest, some are going to the courts, and all this in an effort to move your government to provide for that basic right to an education. And I want to quote that brilliant young activist whom I know you've met, Taoiseach, Cara Darmody. She has asked how Cabinet Ministers can expect the children of Ireland to grow up to respect the law when they see flagrant law breaking by their own government. And it's a fair point, because the simple fact is that the state has a legal obligation to vindicate the rights of all children to education, yet you're being taken to court for failing in that duty all the time. And while sometimes the state settles or the issue is resolved, Taoiseach, other times we see the state adopting an approach to such litigation like something we would expect from a faceless private corporation. And this shows contempt for children and for their families, because they want nothing more than a diagnosis and then an ability to get a suitable school place in their own community. And it's not a tall order, but those who take the cases feel they have no choice but to do so. It's not just children and their families crying out for help, Taoiseach, because we're also hearing the frustration from teachers, principals, SNAs and school staff. And I know you're hearing it, Taoiseach, I know your colleagues in government are hearing it. During the Easter recess last week, my colleague, our education spokesperson, Deputy Owen Kenny, attended the different teachers' conferences around the country. He engaged with and heard directly from teachers about their frustration on this issue. And a recurrent theme he heard about was desperate experiences. One primary teacher he spoke with who had 28 pupils, several with learning difficulties, just one SNA in the class. Another teacher who was told that no special class in the school would be sanctioned, despite having more than 10 children on a provisional waiting list. Taoiseach, ours is supposed to be the land of saints and scholars, but how can teachers be expected to teach when they're also expected to carry out the roles of therapist, of SNA, and our SNAs are so overburdened? Taoiseach, you often ask where are the solutions in this House. Well, I have a set of solutions here for you. We have our motion. It's before the House tomorrow. I'm asking you, Taoiseach, to commit to passing our motion and to giving parents and children the certainty and clarity they need.
Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy, for raising this very important issue, which is top of the government's priority in relation to special needs in general and particularly special needs education. And first of all, I would make the point that special education now accounts for about 28% of the entire education budget, a 48% increase in 4 years since 2020. Staffing has grown 27%, with 23,400 special needs assistants now in our school system. 23,400. Now, that's not a story of pulling back or regression or cuts or anything like that. It's one of expansion and growth, and it will continue to grow. We now have 124 special schools serving 9,112 pupils. 11 new ones opened since 2020, 5 more opening in this academic year in 2025-2026. The number of children attending special classes in mainstream schools has doubled over the past 5 years, from just over 9,000 in 2019 to almost 19,000 in 2024, with 3,335 special classes now in place to support them. Up to 2,700 new special education placements are planned for 2025-2026, including 400 new special classes and 300 special school places. 399 new special classes have already been sanctioned to date, and the remainder would follow. And an additional 1,200 places are available due to student movement. So we will provide up to 3,900 placements this year for about 3,275 seeking them. So the aim is to get a place for every child. There has been issues in terms of geography and certain locations and so on, but I just want to make the point that no stone has been left unturned in terms of getting a place for every child this September, because it is a constitutional right of every child to enjoy to enjoy an education. And it is our obligation in government to vindicate that right. And it's far better that resources are allocated towards the schools as opposed to the courts any day. And that is always my objective, and that of the Minister for Education, Helen McEntee, and the Minister for Special Education, Michael Moynihan. And we're going to continue to work on this, both at primary and post-primary level, in terms of making sure that we do everything we possibly can. And there still are some challenges in the Dublin area in terms of speed of getting the special classes constructed, get the planning constraints and so on, but we're working flat out, and I know the two ministers in particular are on the special education front. On the assessment of need, we have developed and sanctioned already the National In-School Therapy programme, and that is now underway. That decision is being taken, and we will roll out a national system where we will have therapists starting in our special schools.
Well, Taoiseach, you've given us some figures, and of course there are some good news stories around the country. And indeed, I've visited schools with really superb facilities. I would acknowledge that. And there are some new builds that are really impressive. But as you've said yourself, there are still immense challenges. In the Dublin area, there are immense challenges. You speak of growth and expansion, but there isn't sufficient growth and expansion to meet the growing demand and the growing needs out there. I'll give you some figures. 14,221 children overdue an assessment of needs, nearly 13,000 awaiting first contact with the CDNT, and last September, shamefully, 126 children with special educational needs who were not given a school place that September. The immense frustration, the immense distress that the delay in accessing and securing appropriate places was causing for those children, for their parents, many of whom we've all met. So, Taoiseach, the reality is that we've put forward in the Labour Party a set of 9 clear asks.
Thank you, Deputy.
A set of 9 clear asks, Taoiseach, in our motion tomorrow.
Thank you,
and I'm
Deputy.
asking you to take those on board.
To respond.
We're calling for the government to adopt a plan that will provide parents and crucially children with clarity and with appropriate school places.
As I said, the plan is there. We've already, in the past 5 years, provided 11 new special schools, 5 more set for 2025-2026. In terms of assessment of need, the High Court decision taken some years ago in respect of the preliminary assessment, or what was then the system being organised by the HSE, all of the experts come back to us in government and say that as compounded the delay and the backlog in respect of assessment of need. Government is looking at legislative options to create a better screening programme to make sure we can do an ongoing assessment to try and deal with that backlog. And that's work on the way. And yesterday, the Cabinet Subcommittee on Disability took decisions in that respect, and Minister Norma Foley and Hildegard Naughton in the Department of Children made their contribution to that. And the important point is that it's interesting that the NCSE last year, the outgoing government approved the recruitment of up to 40-odd therapists to work with the National Council for Special Education in an advisory capacity for schools across the country. They've had a very strong recruitment. It's interesting, right? So they've had a very successful recruitment. And now the next phase will be a national school and therapy scheme whereby the NCSE on behalf of schools for the special schools initiative will recruit therapists.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan of the Social Democrats.
Taoiseach, I was hoping that the government had learned its lesson when it was caught out deliberately misrepresenting last year's housing delivery numbers. I was wrong. When figures for affordable housing were finally published last week, something was clearly off with the numbers, because cooking the books was the only way the Minister could pretend the targets had been met. The target was 6,400 new build affordable homes. Only 2,806, less than half the target, were actually delivered. No amount of spin and attempts to inflate the figures can hide the government's failure. Taoiseach, continually trying to mislead the public comes at a cost: your credibility. The reality is nobody trusts this government on housing, and nobody believes your plan is working. Even your own TDs are telling journalists that your handling of housing is a disaster. Taoiseach, at this point, any rational government would admit failure and concede what is needed: a new approach and a radical reset. Instead, the government's big idea is another gimmick, hiring a housing czar, the head of NAMA who oversaw the fire sale of thousands of homes and billions of euro development land is being headhunted. Taoiseach, while the government focuses on spinning its dismal performance, journalist Barry White described what it's like trying to buy a home. A two-bed house in Crumlin with an asking price of €375,000 was receiving bids of €550,000 in a matter of days. These kind of bidding wars are taking place all across the country, and this is the reality that has been faced by thousands of people. Is it any wonder an increasing number of people are giving up on the hope of ever owning their own home? Taoiseach, people who are struggling to buy a home, or who are living in emergency accommodation, or who are paying extortionate rents, are tired of broken promises. What they want is to see a plan that will actually deliver affordable homes. Like the Social Democrats' proposal, produced by my colleague Rory Hearn, to launch a Homes for Ireland savings account. This would leverage some of the €160 billion on deposit to fund the construction of affordable homes. We clearly need alternatives to investment funds if we are going to deliver housing that people can genuinely afford. There are solutions to this housing crisis, Taoiseach. Taoiseach, do you accept that the government missed its affordable housing targets last year? And will you consider the Social Democrats' Homes for Ireland plan to fund affordable housing?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you again raising this issue. And I just want to make the point that even in terms of affordable housing, there were 7,100 affordable housing solutions delivered in 2024, exceeding the year's delivery target of 6,400. And overall, since we came to government in 2020, nearly 13,000 affordable housing options have been delivered by the various delivery partners. And Help to Buy has helped young people to afford to buy houses, first-time new build houses. And Bridge the Gap has also helped first-time buyers in terms of affordability. Now, those are schemes that you opposed. Which raises the fundamental question: how would your position have assisted people in affordability in respect of new homes? And whereas government will always consider new proposals, it is about supply. And I read the article by Deputy Hearn in respect of what you're calling the Home for the Savings Investment, SSIA type scheme, to create funding for affordable homes. That doesn't actually build homes. It can help to create funding, perhaps, into the future. It doesn't actually build homes, though, in the short term. And you're saying it's an alternative to investment funds. We don't have too many investment funds investing in housing right now in the Irish economy, and that is a problem. And I would take the view, we've had SSIAs in the past, They were wrongly criticised at the time, by the way. But anyway, we've moved into a new era, and government is opening consideration a whole range of issues. But the more fundamental point is, how do we get to 50,000 houses in terms of getting them built? And I have yet to see anything from the opposition, genuinely, that answers that question. Government is in and around 30,000 plus. There's been a step change in the last 4 years from where we were, but it's taken huge government investment. And on its own, that will not suffice. So we accept the argument that additional funding is required. We need private sector funding. Now, you seem to suggest that the savings and investment type scheme would be an alternative to the funds. I would argue we need to attract investment in to get more private sector supply to add to the 6 billion plus that the government will be putting into housing in 2025. It'll be close to, we've added 800 million already, so you're looking at about 7 billion plus in 2025 government funding for housing. And therefore we do need alternative sources of funding as well to add to that. And as I say, if you want to put forward a detailed proposal to us in that respect, we'd gladly receive it. I read one article on it, and it's not clear from the article as to how that would cause a significant ramp up of construction in terms of housing, but we're open to any proposals on that front that you may have to, and if you can give us a detailed blueprint of the scheme, we'll certainly assess it.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, you know well that if we increase the funding sources for housing, will increase the construction of housing. In fact, you've often said that the reason that you rely on investment funds is because of a lack of alternatives, and we're putting forward alternative funding streams. The situation, Taoiseach, is that there's now 15,418 people living in homeless emergency accommodation. There's 4,675 children growing up without a home. Rents have never been higher, house prices have never been higher, and homelessness is at record levels. This is causing incredible stress, hardship and anxiety for families across Ireland. The answer from the government to this seems to be to inflate figures around affordable housing delivery and to cook the books. All of a sudden you are counting vacancy grants as an equivalent of new build affordable homes, and this is fooling no one. So I ask you again, Taoiseach, will you admit that the government missed its affordable housing targets last year?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
So, I mean, you're very dismissive of the vacancy grants. They're huge. But they're a huge addition to make houses affordable, for God's sake. I mean, you talk to anybody who avails of those grants, they're incredibly substantial. And so are the grants for dereliction if you buy a derelict house or refurbish it. I mean, that makes it affordable, made it possible, and it's been a success. I know you opposed it, I think. So we went out against that as well, because you went against the affordability legislation that was required, that was passed through the House in the last Dáil. But in respect, and the homelessness issue is becoming much more complex in terms of the composition of those that are homeless now and the additional pressures that have come on in terms of emergency housing accommodation. And it's not similar to what homelessness was 5 or 6 years ago. And that needs to be acknowledged as well and analysed. And what government is focusing on is exiting people from homelessness as quickly as possible and preventing people from becoming homeless in the first instance.
Now we move to Deputy Catherine Connolly.
Tá mig díreoirste winter na Palestina agus an cinenne díthú atá siúil in ar nanam agus atá muid an seo ag cans agus bríre milse rá agibhse gan bartar be. Inné sa cuairt dúirt blinne nígrála. Israel has closed all crossings and it has turned Rafah itself, once a refuge for almost 1.5 million displaced Palestinians, into a post-apocalyptic wasteland. At the weekend alone, 52 people, children, women and men, were slaughtered. In addition to the 51,000 Palestinians already killed, 70% of whom are women and children. Over 120,000 Palestinians reported injured. Israel has systematically destroyed 95% of Gaza's hospitals and maternity clinics. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance told us Israel began its blockade, and since then, not a single Taoiseach, not a single trunk carrying food, fuel, medicine or any other essentials has been allowed in, no matter how critical. And just in case you were in any doubt, the Defence Minister, Israel Katz in Israel, has told us Israel's policy is clear. Just in case we were in any doubt at all, no humanitarian aid is about to enter Gaza. Preventing humanitarian aid to Gaza is one of the main tools of pressure. No one is going to get any aid. Taoiseach, I've said repeatedly, I think my best thing would be to stand here in silence, really, at what is happening in our name, genocide, while we use sweet words and do little else. And we boast that we are better than any other country, and that measuring stick is really very low. Yesterday, again, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Assistance told us, we know, he laid out, that people are thirsty. We know that solid waste is piling up. We know that people are trapped under the rubble and living on the rubble. We know that the land is shrinking with displacement orders. We know that fishers are being shot at sea and that nowhere is safe. He says all of that. And I'll go on to what we see. We have seen the images of children's bodies being thrown from one building to another due to the force of the bombing. We have seen the videos of families being burnt alive. This is the Office for Coordination of Human Assistance, not my words. We have seen the bodies of our colleagues who have been killed. We have seen the total and complete destruction of infrastructure in Gaza and all around us. We have seen patients to be turned away after the hospital has been bombed. I wish I could go on, Taoiseach, but what I'm asking you is, can you please tell me what specific action you're going to take, including the Occupied Territories Bill, stopping trade with Gaza, inspecting the planes in Shannon, at the very least, to make our words mean something.
Yeah, Deputy, I've been very, very consistent in this House, and the government has been very, very consistent in this House in its condemnation of Israeli attacks on Gaza and the bombardment and continuing bombardment of Gaza. Absolutely consistent and without question. We've taken a whole range of steps since the outbreak of this terrible war and since the horrific attack by Hamas on October the 7th, which also deserves to be roundly condemned, and I've done that too. But the blockade of the last 50 days, where no food, no medicines, and no essential supplies have been allowed into Gaza, is a war crime. Of that, in our view, there is no doubt. It contravenes international humanitarian law. It is horrific in its enactment and in its implementation. Now, Ireland has supported strongly UNRWA, I think about 58 million, significantly per capita ahead of others. That's not the point, but we have not only supported it financially, but diplomatically, politically. We took efforts to make sure that when the storm was blowing over, when there was a lot of efforts to try and undermine UNRWA, Ireland stood up and said to the herd that was going in that direction, stop, we need to continue to support UNRWA, because it's the only organisation that can play any meaningful role in the reconstruction of Gaza and also in the continuing provision of humanitarian supplies into Gaza. And there has to be an immediate opening up of humanitarian access. We have recognised the state of Palestine. We were a lot of pressure in this House for us to do that, but we did it with other countries to try and create leverage with the Arab Peace Plan, to try and get momentum behind that. So with Norway, with Spain, Slovenia and others, we collectively did that. And we've also intervened in the South African case before the ICJ in terms of the case of genocide, and we've put in a very thoughtful, I would argue, strong and comprehensive legal intervention around the issue of the prevention of humanitarian aid in time of war, as inviting the court to broaden its definitions in terms of both intention and in terms of that issue of preventing humanitarian aid into a conflict area, and in this case into Gaza, has been broadly in line with the Convention's definition. Again, that I think was a well-informed which took a lot of criticism from different quarters. But nonetheless, was an intervention, I think, that was considered and very well informed, and has greater credibility because of that internationally than it would otherwise have been. So it wasn't just a political intervention or a superficial intervention, it was a substantive
Deputy
one.
Connolly.
I think the bottom line is we have to do everything. What we can do is we can add with others to keep the pressure on through all the international fora that we're members of. But we're not responsible, and it's not in our name, the behaviour of Minister Katz or indeed Smotrick or indeed Ben Gavir and others.
It is our responsibility, Taoiseach. We have an obligation to prevent genocide. We have an obligation not to be complicit in genocide. Yes, it is our job to do something. It is particularly our job as a country that was colonised, and that's exactly what has happened in relation to Israel's colonisation of Gaza and Palestine. We have a duty as a republic, as an independent sovereign state, to take action. Doctors Without Borders, it's a mass grave of Palestinians and those coming to their assistance. Those coming to their assistance. I challenge all of us to stand up and stop the genocide that's taking place in our name because we are complicit. We're allowing Shannon. We're doing nothing about planes coming through Shannon to go to punish and murder Palestinians. We are doing nothing to progress the Occupied Territories Bill. We are increasing our export of dual-use goods and so on. We are trading with Israel as part of the EU bloc. And you stand here today and take pride that we have done something. I have praised you in the past for standing up and recognising Palestine. I no longer praise you. Genocide is going on in our name.
Thank you, Deputy.
I never used the word pride. So don't put words in my mouth, please. I never used that word, nor did I use the word boast. Everything within our capacity to have an impact on this situation we have been doing. And we shouldn't overinflate either the impact of other measures that you've mentioned. There are no planes leaving Shannon for Gaza. You have made an assertion that there are, and there are not. There are not.
Deputies,
and I have to say, Deputy, I respect you a lot, and I respect your good faith on these issues, to a point though, because I do often get the sense that sometimes the debate on Palestine in this House and elsewhere is more about trying to create division between the public, the people and the government of the day. That is my genuine sense, because I've been through this since the beginning of the war, and that is a genuine takeaway I have from some of the protestations and even the interruptions that certain people on the far left in particular interrupt various meetings we've had, endeavouring to disrupt. That sounds fine if people want to do that, but it's not advancing, I would argue, in my view, sensible, logical and rational debate. What's going on is appalling, Deputy. No one has a monopoly of virtue on the question in this House,
now,
nor should one
in
seek
accordance with standing order, and just before I move to standing order,